What if I told you, most people don't realize they've wasted their life until it's already too late? Imagine this. You wake up one day, and you're 60 years old. Your body feels slower. Your energy isn't the same. The mirror shows someone you barely recognize. And suddenly, it hits you. All those dreams you once had, they're still dreams. Unfinished, untouched, forgotten. You sit there in silence, asking yourself one question. Where did all the time go? But the truth is, it didn't disappear. You gave it away, one day at a time, to routines you hated, to fears that controlled you, to distractions that meant nothing. And the scariest part? You didn't even notice it happening, because it didn't feel like you were wasting your life. It felt normal. It felt safe. It felt comfortable. You told yourself, I'll start tomorrow. I just need more time. Let me settle first. But tomorrow turned into next week. Next week turned into years. And years turned into a lifetime. Now imagine sitting in a quiet room. No noise. No distractions. Just you and your thoughts. And for the first time in your life, you're forced to face the truth. Not the version of your life you show people, but the real one. The one where you could have done more. You could have been more. You could have lived more. That pain, it doesn't come from failure. It comes from not even trying. From knowing you had the chance, but you let it slip away. This story is not about one person. It's about 3 people who lived completely different lives. One chased stability. One chose comfort. One ran from reality. But they all ended up in the same place. Regret. And here's why this matters to you. Because right now, you might be doing the exact same thing. You might be waiting, delaying, avoiding, thinking you have time. But time doesn't wait. It keeps moving, with or without you. So before you watch this story, ask yourself one question. If nothing changes in your life, where will you be 10 years from now? The answer might scare you. And maybe that's exactly what you need. Because this isn't just a story. It's a warning. A wake-up call. And by the end of this video, you might see your own life in a way you never have before. So don't skip. Don't scroll. Because this might be the moment that changes everything. I thought I had more time. John Miller's voice was barely a whisper as he stared at the ceiling of a quiet hospital room in New York. The steady beep of the monitor beside him echoed like a countdown, each sound reminding him of something he could never get back. Time. But this story doesn't begin in that hospital room. It begins decades earlier, with a young man full of dreams. John grew up in a small town in Ohio. As a teenager, he was curious about the world. He used to sit by his bedroom window, looking at airplanes crossing the sky, imagining himself inside one, traveling to places he had only seen in magazines. Paris, Tokyo, California. He wanted to explore, to build something of his own, to live a life that felt exciting and meaningful. I don't want a normal life, he once told his best friend, Mark. But life has a strange way of changing plans. At 22, right after graduating from college, John got a job offer from a corporate company in Chicago. It wasn't his dream job, but it was stable. Good salary, benefits, security. Just for a few years, he told himself. It's a smart decision. And it was, at least in the beginning. The first few months were exciting. New city, new people, a sense of independence. John felt like he was moving forward. But slowly, something began to change. His days started to look the same. Wake up early. Rush through traffic. Sit in an office for 9 hours. Come home tired. Watch TV. Sleep. Repeat. At first, he didn't question it. After all, this was what everyone around him was doing. This is life, his co-workers would say. This is what being an adult means. So John accepted it. At 25, he got his first promotion. His salary increased. He moved into a better apartment. Bought nicer things. For a moment, it felt like progress. But deep inside, that same quiet voice still existed. The voice that whispered, "This isn't what you wanted." He ignored it. "Not now," he told himself. "I'll figure things out later." Later. That word became his biggest mistake. At 28, he met Emily. She was kind, supportive, and brought stability into his life. They got married within 2 years. At 30, John bought a house. At 32, his first child was born. At 35, he had 2 kids, a growing career, and what looked like a perfect life from the outside. If you saw John back then, you would think he had everything. A stable job, a loving family, a comfortable home. But what you couldn't see was what he had given up. Every time he saw travel photos online, something inside him stirred. Every time he heard about someone starting a business, he felt a small regret. Every time he thought about his younger self, he felt a little lost. But responsibility is powerful. "It's too late now," he told himself. "I have a family to take care of. I can't take risks anymore." So once again, he chose to wait. And life kept moving. At 40, John was deeply stuck in routine. His job was no longer exciting, it was exhausting. The passion he once had for life was replaced by stress and deadlines. But he kept going, because stopping felt impossible. Every morning, he looked at himself in the mirror, convincing himself, "This is fine. This is what success looks like." But deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't living. He was surviving. At 45, something unusual happened. His company announced layoffs. For the first time in years, John felt fear, not just of losing his job, but of realizing how dependent he had become on a life he never truly wanted. "What would I even do?" he thought. He had spent over 20 years building a career, but not a life. That moment shook him. For a few days, he thought about change. He thought about finally doing something different. Maybe starting a small business. Maybe traveling. Maybe taking a break. But then, the fear returned. What if I fail? What about my family? What will people say? And just like that, the moment passed. He stayed. The layoffs didn't affect him. And strangely, instead of feeling relieved, he felt trapped. Because now he knew. He had a chance to change, and he didn't take it. Years continued to pass. At 50, life felt heavier. At 55, it felt repetitive. At 60, it felt too late. His kids had grown up. They were busy with their own lives. His job, still the same. His dreams, long forgotten. One evening, John sat alone in his living room, scrolling through old photos. There was one picture that caught his attention. It was a photo of him at 20 years old, standing outside, smiling, full of energy, full of hope. He stared at it for a long time. "Where did that person go?" he whispered. And for the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. That's the thing about time. You don't notice it slipping away. Not day by day. Not even year by year. But one day, you wake up and realize everything has changed. And now, lying in that hospital bed, John finally understood something that most people realize too late. It wasn't that he didn't have time. It was that he kept choosing later. And later never came. "I'll do it when the time is right." Sarah Williams repeated those words so many times that they started to feel true. But deep down, they were just an excuse. Sarah grew up in Los Angeles, California, a city filled with dreamers, creators, and people chasing something bigger than themselves. From a young age, she was different. While other kids played outside, Sarah would sit quietly with a paintbrush in her hand, lost in her own world of colors. Her parents noticed her talent early. "You have something special," her mother would say, watching her turn a blank canvas into something beautiful. In school, her teachers encouraged her too. Her artwork stood out. It had emotion, depth, a story behind every stroke. By the time she was 18, Sarah had one clear dream. She wanted to become an artist, not just as a hobby, but as a life. She imagined having her own studio, displaying her work in galleries, traveling the world, capturing moments through art. It wasn't just a dream, It felt like her purpose. But dreams don't survive on passion alone. They are tested by reality. After graduating high school, Sarah faced her first major decision: follow her passion, or choose a safer path. Her parents, though supportive, were also realistic. "Art is unpredictable," her father said gently. "We just want you to have a stable future." Those words planted a seed of doubt in her mind. What if they were right? What if she failed? What if she couldn't make enough money? What if people didn't like her work? Fear is powerful, and sometimes it sounds like logic. So instead of applying to an art school, Sarah chose a different route. She enrolled in a business program. Just as a backup, she told herself. I can always come back to art later. There it was again. Later. In college, Sarah tried to balance both worlds. She attended her classes during the day and painted at night. But slowly, her priorities began to shift. Assignments, exams, and responsibilities started taking over. Painting became less frequent, then occasional, then rare. By the time she graduated at 22, Sarah had something she thought she needed: a stable career path. She quickly got a job at a bank in downtown Los Angeles. The office was clean, organized, and predictable. Everything in her life started to feel secure. A steady paycheck, fixed working hours, a routine she could rely on. And at first it felt good. No uncertainty, no risk, no fear of failure. This is better, she told herself. This is smart. But comfort has a hidden cost. The first year passed quickly. Then the second. Then the third. Her days became structured. Wake up. Get ready. Go to work. Sit behind a desk. Talk to clients. Come home. Eat. Sleep. Repeat. At some point, she stopped noticing the repetition, because it became normal. Every now and then, she would walk past an art gallery in the city. She would slow down, look at the paintings through the glass, and feel something deep inside. A quiet ache. A reminder of who she used to be. Maybe one day, she would think. But she never walked in. At 28, Sarah was promoted. At 30, she moved into a better apartment. At 32, she was earning more money than she had ever imagined. From the outside, her life looked successful. But inside, something was missing. One evening, while cleaning her apartment, she found an old box hidden in the corner of her closet. Inside were her paintings, canvas after canvas, filled with colors, emotions, and memories. She sat on the floor, slowly going through each one. And for a moment, she felt alive again. "This was me," she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. Not because she had lost her talent, but because she had abandoned it. That night, she made a decision. I'm going to start again. The next day, she bought new paints, a fresh canvas. She even cleared a small space in her apartment to create. For the first few days, she was excited. She painted after work, just like she used to. But then, life stepped in again. Work became busier. Deadlines increased. She came home tired. "I'll paint tomorrow," she said. Tomorrow turned into next week. Next week turned into next month. And just like that, the cycle repeated. Comfort had pulled her back in. The truth is, Sarah wasn't lazy. She wasn't incapable. She was trapped. Trapped in a life that felt too safe to leave, and too empty to love. Years passed. At 40, she barely painted anymore. At 45, she stopped calling herself an artist. At 50, she stopped thinking about it completely. Because sometimes, giving up isn't a sudden decision. It's a slow process. A quiet surrender. One day at a time. One excuse at a time. Until the dream disappears. And all that's left is regret. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah sat by her window, looking at the city lights. She noticed a young woman across the street, carrying a large canvas into her apartment. For a moment, Sarah just watched her. And then it hit her. That used to be me. Not the job. Not the lifestyle. But the courage. The passion. The willingness to try. And for the first time in years, she asked herself a question she had been avoiding. What if I had taken the risk? No answer came, because the truth was painful. She didn't fail. She didn't even try. And now, time had moved on. That's the danger of comfort. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't force you to change. It just slowly, quietly, takes you away from the life you were meant to live. And by the time you realize it, you're no longer chasing your dreams. You're just remembering them. Life is short. Just enjoy it. That was Robert Johnson's favorite line. He said it when people asked about his future. He said it when friends talked about careers, goals, or responsibilities. He said it so often that eventually he started believing it completely. But what Robert didn't understand was this. There's a big difference between enjoying life and escaping it. Robert grew up in Houston, Texas. Unlike John or Sarah, he wasn't a dreamer or a planner. He lived in the moment. As a teenager, he loved fun, excitement, and anything that gave him instant happiness. Video games, parties, hanging out with friends. He was always chasing the next good feeling. School was never his priority. Why stress about the future, he would say. We've got time. And just like that, time became something he took for granted. After high school, while his friends applied to colleges or started jobs, Robert chose a different path. He didn't have a clear plan. He just wanted to figure things out. At first, it felt like freedom. No pressure. No deadlines. No responsibilities. He picked up small jobs here and there. Nothing serious, nothing long-term. Just enough to get by. His days were filled with temporary pleasures. Late-night gaming. Endless scrolling on his phone. Watching videos for hours. Hanging out with people who were just as directionless as he was. It felt good in the moment. But moments don't build a life. At 25, Robert's life hadn't changed much. Same habits. Same routine. Same mindset. But something around him had changed. His friends were moving forward. One got a stable job. Another got married. Someone started a business. And for the first time, Robert felt a little left behind. Not enough to change, but enough to notice. Everyone's just stressing themselves out, he told himself. I'm happier than them. But was he? That question stayed in the background, unanswered. At 30, reality started knocking harder. His parents began to worry. You need to think about your future, his father said one evening. I am thinking about it, Robert replied casually. But thinking isn't the same as doing. Deep down, he knew something wasn't right. But change requires effort. And Robert had spent years avoiding effort. So instead of facing reality, he escaped it. Even more. He started spending more time online, more time distracted, more time avoiding anything that made him uncomfortable. Because discomfort forces growth. And Robert wasn't ready for that. At 35, life became repetitive. Not in a structured way like John's. Not in a stable way like Sarah's. But in a meaningless way. Wake up late. Waste hours. Do the bare minimum. Repeat. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. And months into years. At some point, Robert stopped tracking time completely. Because when your life lacks direction, time loses meaning. At 40, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet. Subtle. Dangerous. It was the feeling of emptiness. One night, after hours of scrolling through his phone, Robert suddenly stopped. He looked around his room. Nothing had changed. Same walls. Same habits. Same life. But something inside him felt different. A strange, uncomfortable silence. What am I doing? He whispered. It was a simple question. But it carried years of avoidance behind it. For the first time, he didn't distract himself. He didn't turn on the TV. He didn't pick up his phone. He just sat there, thinking. And what he realized scared him. He had spent nearly 2 decades chasing comfort and entertainment. But he had built nothing. No real skills. No meaningful achievements. No purpose. Just memories of things that didn't matter anymore. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the past. All the time he had wasted. All the opportunities he ignored. All the moments he chose distraction over growth. The next morning, he felt something new. Regret. Not loud. Not overwhelming. But heavy. Like a weight sitting quietly on his chest. For a few days, he tried to change. He looked for jobs. He thought about learning something new. He even made small plans. But there was a problem. Habits built over years don't disappear in days. Every time things got difficult, he went back. Back to comfort. Back to distractions. Back to the life he knew. Because it was easier. And easy is dangerous. At 45, Robert realized something painful. It wasn't just that he had wasted time. It was that he had trained himself to waste it. His mind was no longer used to effort, discipline, or focus. Even small tasks felt overwhelming. And the longer he waited, the harder it became to change. At 50, the regret grew louder. Friends he once laughed with were now living completely different lives. They had families, careers, stories to tell. Robert had excuses and silence. One evening, he met an old friend at a cafe. They talked about the past, shared memories, laughed for a while. Then his friend asked a simple question. "So, what have you been up to all these years?" Robert smiled. But inside, he felt empty. Because he didn't have an answer. Not a real one. Not one he was proud of. That moment stayed with him. 4 days. Weeks. Because sometimes, the hardest truth isn't what others say. It's what you can't say about yourself. Years later, sitting alone in his apartment, Robert finally understood something most people realize too late. Time doesn't stop. It doesn't wait. And it doesn't care if you're ready or not. You can spend it building something meaningful, or you can spend it escaping reality. But either way, it's gone. And now, looking back at his life, Robert didn't feel angry. He didn't blame anyone. Because deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't life that failed him. It was the choices he made every single day. Small choices. Easy choices. Comfortable choices. That slowly, quietly, added up to a lifetime of regret. 3 different lives. 3 different paths. 3 different excuses. But in the end, the same painful truth. Regret. John spent his life waiting for the right time. Sarah spent hers waiting to feel ready. Robert spent his avoiding responsibility altogether. And all of them believed one thing. There's still time. But time doesn't work the way we think it does. It doesn't warn you. It doesn't slow down. And most importantly, it doesn't come back. Years pass quietly. Not in big, dramatic moments, but in small, everyday routines. The same morning alarm. The same daily habits. The same repeated thoughts. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because while everything feels normal, your life is slowly being decided. Not by big choices, but by the small ones you repeat every single day. One evening, in that quiet hospital room in New York, John finally understood this. The machines beside him continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound felt heavier than the last. His children had visited earlier that day. They stood beside him, smiling, trying to stay strong. They told him how much they loved him, how grateful they were for everything he had done. And John smiled back. But inside, he felt something they couldn't see. A deep, silent regret. Not because he failed. Not because he didn't work hard. But because he never truly lived the life he once dreamed of. I gave everything to responsibilities, he thought, but I forgot about myself. Across the country, Sarah sat alone in her apartment in Los Angeles. Her life was still stable. Still comfortable. Still predictable. But something had changed. She had started noticing the emptiness more clearly now. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It just existed, quietly, in the silence after work, in the moments when she had nothing to distract herself. in the feeling that something important was missing. One night, she picked up a brush again. Her hands felt unfamiliar, almost hesitant. She looked at the blank canvas in front of her. So many years had passed. So many chances had been ignored. And yet, the opportunity was still there. Not the same as before. Not as easy. But still possible. For the first time in a long time, she didn't think about fear. She didn't think about what people would say. She didn't think about success or failure. She just painted. And as the colors slowly filled the canvas, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because she had finally stopped waiting. Meanwhile, in Texas, Robert sat in his dimly lit room, staring at his phone. Scrolling. Endlessly. But something was different this time. The content didn't entertain him anymore. The distraction didn't work. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. He turned off his phone and sat in silence. For a long time. Longer than he ever had before. And in that silence, he faced something he had avoided his entire life. Himself. No distractions. No excuses. No escape. Just reality. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But it was necessary. Because change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with awareness. And for the first time, Robert was fully aware of the life he had created. And the time he had lost. The truth is, most people don't suddenly wake up one day and decide to waste their life. It happens slowly, quietly, one delay at a time, one excuse at a time, one comfortable choice at a time. I'll start tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. This is good enough. These words feel harmless, but over time, they become your reality. And before you realize it, years have passed. Opportunities are gone. And all that's left is the question, what if? What if you had tried? What if you had taken that risk? What if you had started when you first thought about it? That question is powerful, because it has no answer, only regret. But here's the truth that changes everything. You are not John. You are not Sarah. You are not Robert. Your story is still being written. Right now. In this moment. Every decision you make, every action you take, every excuse you accept or reject, is shaping your future. You don't need to wait for the perfect time. It doesn't exist. You don't need to feel ready. You never will. And you don't need to have everything figured out. No one does. What you need is to start. Start small. Start imperfectly. Start scared if you have to. But start. Because action creates clarity. And clarity creates direction. And direction creates a life worth living. One day, you will look back at your life, just like they did. And in that moment, you'll ask yourself one simple question. Did I truly live? Not survive. Not exist. Not follow the crowd. But live. And the answer to that question depends on what you do today. So don't wait. Don't delay. Don't trade your dreams for temporary comfort. Because time is moving. Right now. And one day, it will run out. Make sure when that day comes, you don't say, I wish I had. Make sure you can say, I'm glad I did.